A pleasure for me to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Roland Nitschke is joining us from the University of Freiburg, where he is the academic director of the Live Imaging Center at the Albert Ludwigs University. Roland studied biology and biochemistry, and after working as a postdoc at the MPI for Biophysics in Frankfurt, worked as a visiting scientist at the NIH in Bethesda in the lab of Ken Spring. And that's where he first started working with confocal microscopy. And I guess that's where he got bitten by the microscopy bug, because after he returned to Freiburg as a group leader, he set up the Live Imaging Center in 2001 and has been the head of that center ever since. Roland is also very active in German bioimaging, and he co-founded the German bioimaging community together with Elisa May in 2010. And Roland is also very passionate about quality control in light microscopy and has been working with DIN and ISO standard organizations since 2016. And following on that work has in April 2020 actually started this initiative on quality assessment and reproducibility for images and instruments in light microscopy, or the acronym QUAREP LiMi. And that's what he'll tell us about today. And I really look forward to hearing about this initiative and what the goals of it are. Thank you, Roland, for joining us today.
Thanks, Johanna, for introducing me so nicely. So, yeah, when I thought about the title, I realized that this is really a very, very old story, which we maybe finally might really solve to a certain extent. So it's really 15 years ago, and I will start the presentation actually just by going through some slides which I took from older talks, so that you really see this is long time work. So that's actually, I think that was the first talk I gave about standardization and quantification in microscopy. It was in Göttingen at the Photonic Network in 2004. And at that time, I was actually quite actively starting with that. So I was able to convince Fred Brakenhoff to have a special session of 90 minutes at the FOM. I have to recall where it was. I don't know, actually. But so we had really 90 minutes, and I invited several speakers to talk about standardization and quantification and reproducibility. And I joined forces at that time also with Ute Reschgenger from the Federal Institute of Material Research and Testing in Berlin, which is actually the standard organization of Germany for fluorescence calibration. And as you later will see, Ute now also joined QUAREP LiMi, because more or less it's her task in the BAM to do these kind of efforts. So maybe some of you who are deeper in the microscopy field, they also know that at that time there was Bob Zucker very, very active because there were at that time the spectral detectors coming up in the confocals, and he was really very, very critically looking at the data coming out from the spectral detectors, if you really could reuse or just use a microscope as a spectrometer, which is, I think it was never aimed for, but yeah, if you bring something into the market, then people do what they think it could be done. And so Ute actually, she was working on calibration of spectrophotometers, which is actually very common because they are used in the medical field all the time for patient care and for analyzing really diseases in a hospital. So there you cannot run an instrument when it's not daily calibrated, which we are not at all in this condition in the microscopy field. And we use actually then some of these tools for the spectrometers And these were dye solutions to develop something for microscopy. And this is what you see here actually in the center. This EBD slide with 6 channels where we used some of the dyes, and we really developed this quite heavily. So you see it here sitting on a microscope, and we brought out actually, or it ended with having 2 international patents with Fluka and Schott about the device for calibration of microscopes. The problem actually, we were not able at all to commercialize this because Fluka and later on Sigma and Schott, they evaluated how much money you can earn with such devices, and they said it's not interesting because we cannot make any money out of it. So the patents are still around, but not used. So when we think about why are we in a need of standards, so at least I think if you work in a facility, it's quite important that you know the performance of an instrument and if it's comparable to what it was measuring yesterday or a week ago or 3 months ago. And many people come to facilities and also in their research labs, they want really to quantify signals. And if you ever tried this, you know this is actually hard work. And even if there are many papers published where people said we did quantify our measurements, I think they hardly did it really right. You can still publish it just because the referees are also not very experienced and they have no idea what is the fluctuation of the output from a microscope. But if you carefully look, you see there's a lot of fluctuation which you hardly see because the biological fluctuations are quite large. But if you are looking for changes which are around 3 or 5%, then you will have a very hard time using a microscope to really do quantification of your signals. And it's clear actually if you buy a very expensive instrument, you would like to know, is it really performing in the specs? However, where do you find the specs of a confocal microscope? When you get the instrument, you hardly get a nice protocol. If you get a protocol, still you cannot later on check in a year if it still does or gives the performance, because you have no manual how to do the performance measurements, or there were special tools used from the companies which you again have no access to. So, and it's clear there are many terms or properties of an instrument which you want to check, like the intensity of the illumination, the field flatness, the sensitivity of the detectors, and so on. And what was a major problem, and it is still a major problem, is that if you talk with companies about these kind of projects and measurements, there is always the fear, oh, this could be used to compare an instrument from one company to the instrument of another company. Still, it's already done, but I think it's very often done so bad that even whatever you get out as a result, people believe in it, but I doubt that it's a true or a nice comparison. So, and I think the very important aspect is actually more or less that you don't see it as a first choice to compare one brand to the other. Very often what you really would like to have is the instrument performing within a certain property or within a certain range, and how is it changing over time. And also sometimes it might be important to compare different kind of techniques, like say wide field and confocal, or confocal and deconvolution. And you have now also so many mathematical approaches where you improve the image quality to some extent, but still you have no hard measures quite often. So we all know also when you want to publish a paper, very often it's not enough anymore that you already describe or you select a certain image and then you have to convince the reviewers that what you are showing is the typical image. This is so biased that it's interesting that still it's widely accepted that, yeah, choosing just an image and say that's what I have seen, or you say I have seen it 10 times and then, yeah, people have to believe you. But we all know how difficult it is actually to reproduce a result which you see in a journal published, because sometimes there is not enough metadata presented in the publication. This is due to restrictions of the length of the manuscript, and also in the supplement even you hardly can give all the data of the instrument, because actually you don't know them very often. Yeah, who is measuring the intensity of the illumination every day before he does an experiment, which in reality you might have to do. So, and it's clear the instruments are complicated and there's a lot of things which can happen that the performance is not the same in 1 week that it was the week before. And also what we see more and more, and you know of all these big publications where you had maybe 10 international groups working on one subject, and you acquire images in the US and you acquire images in the UK and in Germany, and in the end sometimes you would like to throw it all in a big basket and say we want to have a mean value of all these experiments. But currently I would not do that, because it's very hard to be sure that you can do that. So I think the data currently which you get from one instrument and the other instrument cannot be pooled easily. And finally, if we look to the medical research, there actually, what I mentioned before, calibration is more or less a must. But currently no one is using actually fluorescence actually for patients' data. Okay, so I have here just listed, I will not go through all these things, what we want to standardize and what we have to measure for that. But if it's recorded, you can have a look later on to these topics. So still, you see down there, this PowerPoint sheet was actually from 2005. So nothing has changed. We are asking since 15
Roland,
years. Yeah.
I don't think your slide did not change, so we're still seeing, yes, I think now we're seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we are asking since 15 years for something, and we don't have succeeded in getting it. And we can blame ourselves as a community because we didn't bring this good enough forward. But I think to some extent, it's also interesting that the companies were able to ignore this demand more or less completely. Yeah. So I think not much happened. But I don't want to blame anyone, because currently I have a feeling that we bring things forward. So here you see again the list continued. We want to look at the sensitivity of the detectors, the linearity of the intensity. Still, spectral correctness is a problem, and also, even if everybody is using it, we all use unmixing with the spectral detectors, but I'm not aware actually of really many publications or any numbers given which can tell you if you can unmix something where you have maybe just 3% of one fluorophore and 97 of the other. Is it still possible to unmix then the 3% reliable? It would be nice to know that, because then maybe you would be able to do even more sophisticated experiments. So that's just the example from the patent application which we did. So it's still in the drawer, and currently we are starting again an attempt to get some money to develop this really to a product, which we will maybe get by the German Ministry of Industry. Okay, so then actually I jumped now 15 years, because then German bioimaging started again an initiative, and we invited the big 4 microscope companies for a kind of roundtable discussion, and we discussed again more or less all our needs. And I think the most important outcome of this discussion was, and that's shown here in red, we heard at that meeting for the first time that there is currently just, or at that time in 2015, there was a group started in the DIN ISO field, which developed, or which aimed to develop a DIN norm and later on an ISO norm for confocal microscopes. And they invited us actually to join this, and I did this together with Werner Zuschrater. So I work in the DIN microscopy group since that time, and I showed a lot of this work at the ELMI meeting in 2017. And because I think maybe not many of you are aware or understand what DIN and ISO is. You all know these are norms, but what does a standard mean? It's actually a document which specifies the requirements for a product or for a process, and the standards are developed in DIN, or there are also other organizations which can develop standards in the way that you have there in this committee sitting companies together which work on the same kind of product, and they have an interest actually more or less in developing this standard, because it quite often helps the product when you want to sell it. If you can say it fulfills the ISO or the DIN norm, and it's also somehow a kind of orientation when you develop a new instrument. Then you can look, okay, there is this norm. Does my new instrument fulfill easily this norm, or is it much better, or whatever? The problem, and I realized this only maybe after 2 or 3 years, is that the norms which are developed, they only include, I would say, definitions of certain specifications. However, they do not contain how you have to measure. So there is no manual which says, use this tool and then do the following, blah, blah, blah. That's not included. And that is actually the driving force now for our QUAREP LiMi initiative, because what we aim for is that we have now the confocal microscopy norm, where several of these measurements or these values are specified, but not the manual to measure it. And now we want to develop the manual. And my approach is actually to do this together with the industry and with specialists who know about all the technical details, because this you really have to know, that you can bring something out which is in the end then accepted by everybody. And if you have the industry from the beginning in, I think they can clearly say at any point also what they will follow you and where they would stop. And this is also in the DIN committee, for example, there is quite a detailed and specific discussion going on, but it's clear you will not really show the others all your secret gadgets and so on. Yeah, and this is also a little bit a problem for our QUAREP LiMi initiatives, because we want to measure actually specifications, and in the end, yeah, if there would be really bad things going on in the instruments, the companies would not tell us. Who would tell, think, I have there a problem, you will not tell openly that you have a problem. But currently, I do not have a feeling that for us working on this topic, we have a problem. Okay, so that's just from the draft, but it's now published, this DIN norm, and you see there are a lot of parameters specified about microscopes in there. And you have to buy this for 70 euro. So it's copyright protected, so I cannot show you really more about this. But here I in the text I have again, oh sorry, I was jumping. I have again specified what is the aim of our initiatives is it's to develop within the microscopy community with the manufacturers and this is important with national standardization agencies, and you will see what I mean, instructions and manuals. And also we aim for that when we have this, we have to teach the people to use it properly. So there will be, when we have finished the protocols, or more or less when we have finished a draft, we will already start testing it if it's really, if we have done a good job in our instructions in the manuals, and then we will go out to the community and do teaching courses at whatever occasions. You can say we do it at an ELMI meeting, we can send 3 people via global bioimaging to Australia and distribute there the knowledge about these things. We are also looking for tools which we need actually to do the measurements. Because in a norm, you never ever will say you have to use that and that tool to do the measurement, because this would say you have to use from that company this tool, and this will not be in a DIN or in an ISO norm, because it's it would give a certain prediction, and so that's not used. But we in the community, we can say, okay, there are maybe 3 or 4 tools which you can use to do these kind of measurements. So QUAREP LiMi, it stands for Quality Assessment and Reproducibility for Instruments and Images in Light Microscopy. And we have academia and industry in there, and I actually started this with a web meeting at the 28th of April. Originally, we planned a physical meeting, but that, you know, was not possible in April, and it's still not possible. And we continue in collecting members, and actually this number here is already wrong. So we are now at 125 people who are working in QUAREP LiMi. And we decided at that first meeting that we want to establish working groups, and the number is 10, which actually look on different topics of interest. And there in these working groups, I think the next slide, no, it comes later. Here you see actually how the community has grown, and you see all the colored countries where we have members joining QUAREP LiMi. And actually I'm also quite proud that the relation female-male is good for such a technical topic, I have to say, because it's very hard, even if there are a lot of women around in this field, to interest people and to get them. But currently I'm happy with that. I'm monitoring this all the time, because I had a meeting before where I failed actually to get enough women, and I was really punished in the community heavily because people complained I was not taking care of the female interests. But now I hope we do a good job. You see also when we look at the distribution where the people are coming from, I think we have a lot of non-European members, mostly from the US and Canada, but also Japan and Australia. And we try also to fill some holes. So I'm in contact with Brasilia to get there more people involved. Okay, sorry, I have to stop this phone here. So, okay. And now when we look actually in the community, so the start effort was mostly starting from German bioimaging together with the French community and BINA. But there were also at that point some just, I would say, individuals from the microscopy community in there. And then later, UK bioimaging was also quite early here. And then we have the Netherlands and the Japanese colleagues. And we have 3 of the standardization organizations. So the NIST and the NPL. NPL is UK and NIST is US. And we have observers from the DEAN, and I'm also a DEAN member, and the ISO 2. And we have now also from the EMVA, which is actually the organization which is looking in this field here for cameras. Very important, we have the people from the OMERO, the OMI community there, because a big topic is collecting metadata and preservation of metadata and how to collect them and all these things. And then at a certain point, I contacted Antje, and that's the reason why we have now Euro-BioImaging and global bioimaging, as I would name you currently observers, but you have to say if you think it's something else. And then we have the companies in there, and we are actively looking for companies, and actually currently it's also that companies hear about this and they just send me an email and say they want to join. And for specific topics, for example, I contacted, because we have one group which is taking care of the microscope tables and the focus. I contacted Marzhauser and Prior just to have some really specialists in the group who help us a lot. So, and the same is true for the laser companies, which I invited, and it's always a little bit of convincing work to do, but in the end, I think all of them are happy to be with us. So I don't have to read all this here, but you can also find it on our website. I will shortly come to the website. So these are all the topics we are interested in and working on. So we had a second meeting, 9th of July. I think there were 80 attendees, and at that time, actually, I presented also, we have now a cloud storage where we have all the things collected which we need. I will talk a little bit more about that. We have an event calendar where all the meetings of the work groups are in there. And we discussed at that meeting also what about local and national initiatives which actually also look for standardization or quality control. And we are completely convinced that QUAREP is just a kind of umbrella, and under this umbrella all the national communities can find themselves again. And when you see later on, when I show you the work groups, I think we nicely managed that the leading people are again representing more or less the international feeling what we have in QUAREP LiMi. We also are actively trying to find publication organs, and actually we are now successful. So I think we will have quite soon a 2-page, I would name it tweezer, about QUAREP LiMi in Nature Methods. So they quickly agreed on that when we sent them our ideas about this, and we are working also in having finally maybe a book where all the protocols can be published. And we are talking with Springer about that. So when we founded the work groups, the idea was we give the topics of the work groups, and then the people can assign themselves to the work groups, and that we had actively people voting for that. And that was the result of these votings. And then we had, or each of the work groups, they had their first meeting. And you see here now the numbers of people working in these working groups. So it's at least already, the smallest one are 12 and 13, but in many of them are 20 people working there. And we elected chairs and vice chairs. They do the internal planning within the work groups. So they invite the people to the virtual meetings, and they also coordinate the cloud a little bit, and they have to write the meeting protocols. They have to make the agenda. So it's a little bit of work, but up to now, I think there was no problem. So people loved to do that work. And you see actually, so some groups, they had their second meeting, and some of them already are knowing the third date of the date of the third meeting. So it's really going fast, and we have also a white paper now, a very long one, which is around 10 pages, which we will go maybe soon to publish this also in a journal. So the idea of how we do the manuals is the following, and I adapted this a little bit because the work in the DIN and ISO norm, I think this is established, how they work out a standard. And so I adopted this, and our way is actually, so in the work group, you make a draft of a protocol or of some specifications. With this draft, this you can then present, or this draft before you test it within the group. So you have 10 people and you say, now use this draft and do the measurements and give your criticism if it works or not. So this leads to some modifications. And then at a certain point, we go with this draft into the whole QUAREP community. Again, we will get feedback. And from this feedback, there's another modification, and maybe we do 2 or 3 rounds. And after that, we say, okay, we now want to publish this. And then people can use it. And again, in compliance what ISO or DIN is doing, after a certain time, after we have to see maybe 1 or 2 years, you get again feedback. So it's like bug reports. And then you implement this in the draft, or it's no longer the draft. It's you do a first revision of the manual, and this you can continue. And I think this should be successful. And from what I see, so some of the manuals, they have done already 2 or 3 rounds of implementing changes, and it works quite well because everything is in the cloud. People can modify things, and you see who has done the modifications. And then when you have the next meeting of the work group, you discuss openly if these changes are adequate or not. And it's, again, this is the way how the DIN and ISO works, and there my experience is very positive. Okay, so I already told all of this. Yeah, we have the chairs and the vice chairs, and then the cloud. Everybody has write and edit access to the cloud server. We have a website which is growing fast, and there again, everybody can edit and get access. The only thing is they have to know what they are doing. So it's a WordPress site. But up to now, most of the work is actually done by me. Yeah, so this is a weak point, but we are actively trying to get funding on national or international level, because I think this initiative is really important, and I have a very good feeling that we quickly will come to really results which everybody can see. Okay, so I invite you to look at the QUAREP site. Let's see if I click on that. No, it will not work, but I could just change later on the window. So there you will find the member list of all the people, you find the member list of the work groups, you find a contact form where you can just send an email to QUAREP where you can say, I like to join the following work groups, and you might also write what is your experience, what is your interest. And also on the cloud, then this is important, and we actively try to improve this. We have currently a large database with literature about publications for quality control and quality assessment, and this is growing fast. And we have also a database about measurement tools, and they are completely with links, and you can find a price tag, and if there are publications done with these tools, they are also linked in this database. And all on the website as well as on the cloud, you find the agenda and the protocols, the minutes of all meetings, and also we are recording all of our meetings so that people later on can look, and so if they were not available at the time of the meeting, they can really get all the knowledge. And there's also clearly the white paper. I think I'm really near to the end. Yeah, so that's where I'm currently sitting the building in. We don't have this blue sky currently. It's very cloudy and a little bit rainy, and that's my group running the Live Imaging Center. So thanks a lot for your interest.
Thank you very much, Roland, for the great presentation. This is very interesting. Do we have any, Roland, did you want to show the website first?
Yes, so I think I have to see, where is my browser here? The website. Yeah, so, can you see it?
No, we can't see it yet.
I think I have then
We're still
to stop the screen sharing and restart it. Or can I do this? Yeah, I can do it like that. Okay. Do you see it now?
Yes, we see it now.
Okay. So the start page is here. There is a short text about it, and then we have this map where all the members come from, and here you have the graph about the members, and then you have the full list here, and you can even export it, download it, and can sort it. So if you are searching, who, for example, from Austria is in QUAREP LiMi, you can quickly get this. So you can have also filters and all these things. And so that's the member list. And then we have the working groups. And the working groups, on the first side, you see who is heading as chair and vice chair the working groups. And then each of the working groups, they have subpages. One, for example, where you find the member list of the working group and a short paragraph what the working group is aiming for. And then next, what we have then, here we have the protocols. There is actually no protocol, so I have to go, I go to the meetings here. And there you see you have PDFs where you can get the agenda of the first meeting, the minutes of the meeting, and then the minutes of the second meeting, and that you have for all the working groups. We have not implemented, so currently we will implement the database with all the measurement tools. That's not not in there up to now. We have the contact page where you can just sign in and give your interest for the working group. And we have the calendar, which shows all the meetings coming up or which have already taken place. And what else? I think that's up to now, is it? Yeah. Okay, now the questions.